everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by Projections, an IRI company. IRI helps organizations navigate workplace challenges, improve employee engagement and productivity, manage labor relations, and implement effective communication strategies to achieve their goals. For more information, you can visit Projections online at projectionsinc.com and IRI at iriconsultants.com. I am Jennifer Oraquah, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. By all accounts, it seems that unions are having a moment right now in the United States, a moment they haven't experienced in quite a while. Efforts at Amazon and Starbucks have made union organizing more visible, employee activism continues to gain public favor, and let's be honest, we all got a wake-up call during the pandemic that forced us to re-examine what employee experience and satisfaction truly mean. In a recent blog post, today's Project HR guest boldly stated that we are officially in the golden age of union organizing. So here with me today to talk about this moment is John Hyman, employment labor attorney, author, speaker, and blogger for OhioEmployerLawBlog.com. John is here to share his perspective on today's climate, talk about what the future looks like, and provide insight into how we might best prepare for it. John, thanks so much for being here with me today on Project HR.
Thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it.
So obviously, we've all been paying attention to the union wins at Starbucks and Amazon and REI, and those are such visible examples of the type of campaigns we're seeing now. But how concerned should we be? In other words, should companies expect and prepare for organizing at this point?
I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being like the most level of concern, I'd put it as close to a 10 as possible, if not even not even
Hmm.
a little over a 10. Yeah, unions, I mean, they're not just having a moment. I think they're having the moment. It is the absolute, I think, perfect storm of situations for union organizing coming on the heels of the pandemic when employee issues were and the employee experience was hyper focused around issues like, is it safe to come to work?
Hmm.
Are Is management listening to my concerns about safety and other things? Where is work taking place? Am I coming into a physical workplace? Am I comfortable coming into a physical workplace? Am I working from home? The pay bumps that we've seen throughout the pandemic, it is kind of the bullet point checklist of union organizing talking points: safety, communication, respect, wages. And we can talk about this later, but notice I put wages at the bottom of that list. And then you add to that this tremendous kind of groundswell of, and I hate to make generational generalizations,
Hmm.
but I mean, Gen Z is there's such an activist
Hmm. Hmm.
generation, and they are leaning much in their activism. They're leaning much more socialist than I think we've ever seen in this country, at least on this wide of a scale. And so all of that's coming together to create this perfect storm for labor unions to have their absolute moment in the sun right now.
And I want to talk a little bit about the article you wrote because that was sort of what sparked my interest in having you on the podcast. It really detailed how we're now experiencing this golden age of union organizing. What was the catalyst for that article?
It was the White House, the report that came out of the White House. I think it was their task force
Hmm.
on worker organization and empowerment, but it was this, I don't know, 40 to 50 page report that came out of the Biden White House about how the Biden administration wants to use kind of the full weight of its executive branch powers to promote and support worker power, worker organizing, and collective bargaining. And they're talking about things like empowering and encouraging the National Labor Relations Board to um, facilitate worker organizing and collective bargaining. To make sure that the federal agencies are doing what they can to make sure employees know about their union organizing rights. So I think Starbucks and Amazon is doing a good enough job of that on their own without the federal government's help.
Hmm.
And then making sure the federal government has kind of enough resources, public resources available for people to go find information. And I mean, I read that the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, it always tends to swing in the political breeze because it's a 5-person politically appointed body by the executive branch, and
Hmm.
so in a Democratic administration, you're going to have a 3-2 majority on the board. In a Republican led administration, 3-2 3-2 pro management, and so it does tend to sway in the political breeze with their policies, but this is by far I've been a management side labor and employment lawyer now for 25 years, and it's by far the most aggressive push I've seen coming out of the federal government to say we are going to not just have pro worker policies, but aggressively advocate for a pro union agenda on the federal level.
And the report, it really set the stage for this new organizing wave. And I know we sort of alluded to some of these factors, but what factors have led to this potential new age? I really want to break it down. Activism, legislative, what sort of factors have led to this?
Yeah, I really think a lot of it is highlighted by the pandemic for starters. I think the safety issues that we've seen highlighted during the pandemic, I think, is and the lack of employees feeling that they had any say, voice, or participation in the process, that uh, they had a sympathetic ear in management in terms of what was being done from a policy and procedure standpoint around workplace safety and other pandemic related issues. I think that has a lot. I really think that has a lot to do with what has given unions the the kick in the butt that has given them a much more sympathetic ear with employees than they've had, at any point in the last, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years.
Hmm. So, what role did the pandemic reset? How did that impact this new embrace of labor?
I mean, whether we call it the great resignation or the great reshuffling or whatever, I've seen it called a number of different things. It's all focused on employees kind of no longer just sitting still and just accepting the job that they have because it's the job that they have. Employees are now looking to feel satisfied. They're looking to feel enriched. They're looking to feel, a sense of purpose in what they're doing. Um, a- and and I think by and large, it's easy to say. Take Starbucks. Starbucks is the example, so it's
Mm,
easy to pick on them. But does a barista feel enriched, enlightened, and pouring
right.
coffee every day, right? Maybe
Right.
they do. Maybe your life love is pouring the perfect latte for a customer. That's God bless you. That's
Yes.
fantastic if that's your
We'll take
passion and
it
that's what you
for
live
sure.
for. Um, but if that's your job and that's what you're doing to earn a living, they're looking for their sense of respect, belonging, a seat at the table. They're turning away from the employer because they weren't getting it there, and they're turning to someone else that's going to listen to them, that's going to give them a voice, and that's the labor union.
Another trend we're seeing now is, of course, less traditional unions. It seems like that big labor may have had its day, and we're seeing a lot of in-house activism. What does this trend mean for employers?
I think we need to be careful when we talk about kind of employee grassroots. We're going to organize on our own versus quote unquote big labor, because even in the case of Amazon, which was an employee started, an employee focused, an employee run union organizing drive, Chris Smalls did it all kind of grassroots, but he still had the backing of big labor. He was
Mhm,
using union office space. He was using big union attorneys. He was getting support from quote unquote big labor because they recognized the import of the moment. And
mhm,
even in the Starbucks campaigns, we've now seen, as of this week, the UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers,
mhm,
have now attempted to organize its first Starbucks. And so, yes, Starbucks labor union is an employee started, an employee focused campaign, but big labor is now seeing the opportunity there as well and is starting to attempt to organize Starbucks stores as well.
mhm.
So yes, these are largely, at least the big campaigns that we've read about, are largely prompted by efforts by employees to kind of form their own kind of independent labor unions, but they are both being supported by, and in some cases, with the one Starbucks store that the UFCW is attempting to organize,
Mhm.
big labor is now stepping on the feet of these employee efforts
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So in your opinion, are traditional unions simply being opportunistic here? They're recognizing that the winds have shifted and they're taking advantage of that fact, or are they actually employing new organizing strategies, targeting new industries or using new tactics? What's your thoughts there?
It's a combination of both. I definitely think they are being opportunistic. I think big labor is learning from what's working at Starbucks and at Amazon. So, for example, the use of social media, employee created or union created TikToks and Instagram posts and other things. So, big labor is certainly learning from that. They are also looking at new industries to expand into as well. So I
Mhm,
know, for example, I work a lot with craft breweries. The IWW is actively working to organize employees of craft breweries. So there
mm,
are new industries that that labor unions are trying to break into as well. But
mhm,
it's definitely not the labor unions and labor organizing of our parents. It's not the steel mill unions, it's not the auto workers, it's
mhm,
not the kind of traditional, and it still happens there, but the what we're seeing is a branching out from the traditional blue collar manufacturing sectors in which labor, the last time labor had its golden age, I mean, that's where it was focused, and
mhm.
we're just not seeing that focus today. It's definitely a much more branching out to much different industries.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that they've looked into tech and, of course, the cannabis industry, new industries that have sprung up. They've been opportunistic there and jumped on those. So,
Yeah, I mean, we see Apple Store employees now starting to
hmm
organize. So
hmm
yeah, it is definitely they definitely have the attention of lots of employers and lots of different segments that never had to, and frankly, never had to think about these issues before.
And now they've got to think about them very publicly. All right, John, I'm going to take a sponsorship break right now. But when we return, I want to get into what this golden age might mean and how we can prepare for it. So stay with us.
The relationships you have with your employees are critical to the success of your business. In today's ever evolving political and economic climate, those relationships can also be the most vulnerable. Employee dissatisfaction can lead to union organizing activity, potentially disrupting operations, leading to costly lawsuits and negative publicity for your company. The I Labor Relations Consulting team brings with it a wide range of expertise, from former labor management executives to human resources professionals and even award-winning communication experts. We'll help you create an environment where employees feel valued. Our goal is simple. We help your company thrive while creating a positive working environment. Get started today with a personalized labor relations readiness assessment from IRI. We'll provide you with a customized roadmap and the resources you need to succeed. Visit us at iriconsultants.com to learn more.
I'm back now with John Hyman, employment labor attorney at Wickens Herzer Panza, author, speaker, and blogger at ohioemployerlawblog.com. John, what issues are employees organizing around now? It used to always be about wages and benefits, but post pandemic, what's important to workers? What should we be paying attention to?
They're organizing around ideas of respect and communication. They just want a seat at the table to know that they have a voice in what's happening in the workplace. I actually disagree that wages were always the kind of focal point of union organizing.
Mm.
Everybody wants more. I mean, everybody wants more money. I want more money. Who doesn't want more money? But I genuinely don't think that wages were always the touchstone that got employees to organize or won union organizing campaigns
Mhm.
for unions. It's an important issue, but at the end of the day, I mean, the pot of money that's there is the pot of money that's there, and you're not gonna shake extra dollars off the money tree for a company
Right.
just because a union organizes.
Mhm.
So I think really the issues are issues like respect, like safety, and I think it all comes down to the the channels and avenues of communication between employers and employees. Employees want to know that they're respected, that they're listened to, that they have a seat at the table, and those are the issues that unions are I think I've always organized around, but those are the issues that have really have gained traction for unions, in the last, 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, and does company size matter? I mean, we've been looking at these national campaigns like Starbucks. So is unionization happening more now at bigger companies, or just is that just the ones that grab the headlines?
Those are the ones that grab the headlines. I mean, it is certainly happening. It is certainly happening all over the place, and I think we'll see it. I think we'll see it happening more. But when we look at, I mean, part of what's going on now, I believe, is a re-education of the workforce about the purpose of the purpose and the, at least on the one side of the ledger, the perceived benefit of labor unions. And so when we look at the kind of high profile campaigns, the headline grabbing campaigns, there is a large educational component going into that as well. And that's what we're hearing about. But no, it's not just happening in the Starbucks and the Amazons and the Apples. This is going on all over the country.
And what about demographics? I mean, you talked about generational generalities a minute ago. Are certain groups of employees more open to the idea of unionization now?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure if it's one group that is more open to the idea of unionization than another. If we're talking about, um, gender or race or socioeconomic status, I do, as I said earlier, I do genuinely believe that there is a large generational component to this, and I think the activism that we saw in Gen Z, specifically around like the Black Lives Matter movement and some other things, I think that has spilled over into the current wave of unionization that we're seeing.
Hmm. And what about online organizing? How has that changed over the last couple of years?
Definitely become more prevalent. Unions have definitely embraced social media as a means to communicate with employees,
Hmm.
to get their message out to employees. Employers have been, I mean, on the one hand, it's a boon to employers because you see what's going on, right? It's no longer just the employees meeting, in the back room
Hmm.
at a bar. They're publicizing what they're doing. So on the one hand, it's great for employers because they can keep an eye on what's happening. But employers, I think, have been very slow to adopt their campaign strategies to match what the union is doing. And on the one hand, I mean, it's if organizers are standing outside an Amazon location and passing out, free marijuana, it's hard to compete with if you if you're an
Hmm.
employer,
Right.
if you have employees that want free pot,
Right.
that's hard to compete with. But
Right.
I think a lot of what we've seen particularly in the Starbucks campaigns, is we've seen an over reliance on what I call the kind of 20th century union organizing opposition. So the fire the organizers, captive audience meetings where we lock everyone in a room and tell
Hmm.
them, why unions are bad, and that kind of plays right into the hands of what these unions are telling their workers and why the workers are talking to the unions in the first place. And so I think employers need to start thinking about a much softer approach to their union organizing opposition. I read one article that suggested that Starbucks go union neutral. There are large investors in Starbucks, which is a publicly traded company, large shareholders that are suggesting to the board that they go union neutral because their anti-union stances has the potential to
Hmm.
hurt the
Revenue.
value of their
Sure.
shares.
Hmm.
I'm not going to go so far as to say employers should be union neutral. I do think employers need to rethink their union opposition strategies and adopt a much softer approach, because the hard line approach, if you look at Starbucks, whatever 30, I think it's 35 out of 37 campaigns were successful for the union. The approach that employers are taking, it's just not working anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, and we've seen that a lot as well. Alternatives to captive audience meetings and ways to communicate, and in that softer, gentler way that actually, it actually resonates in a much more powerful way than when you think
Yeah,
about
I
it.
mean, instead of telling employees all the reasons why the union is bad,
Hmm.
why don't you tell them all the reasons why you're a good employer to work
Right.
for? I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
reinforce the good. If you can't tell an employee anything good about your workplace,
Right.
you're going to lose the election.
Yes. Yes. So what do you think's ahead? Will union organizing continue to evolve? What do you think is next?
I think we're going to continue to see a prevalence of these high profile campaigns. I think eventually the pendulum will swing back more to the middle, but I think we have a long way to go. We have the National Labor Relations Board is out there, or at least the general counsel of the National Labor Relations
Mhm.
Board, Jennifer Abruzzo, is actively trying to help unions and employees organize with some of the policies that she's arguing that the NLRB adopt. She's trying to get the NLRB to outlaw captive audience meetings, by the way, which I think captive audience meetings can play, as I said a few minutes ago, can play into the hands of what unions are doing here. But there's ways to do it that are less coercive and definitely can communicate a positive, beneficial message to employees. But she's trying to get rid of them just about all across the board.
Mhm.
Trying to get rid of secret ballot elections, which would be, I think, the biggest kind of paradigm shift for employers.
Mhm.
Because right now, unions come in one of two ways. Either they present 30% of cards signed by potential bargaining unit members, typically, though, they come in much higher. And then the employer can ask for a secret ballot election supervised by the NLRB. If they come in with 50% of cards, the employer can choose to, but doesn't have to voluntarily recognize the union. The benefit of the secret ballot election is that there is a time period by which the election is ordered and the election is held, weeks, sometimes longer, sometimes months or longer, where you get to have like a bit of a campaign where you can, as an employer, get your message out to employees about presumably not why the union is bad, but why we are good, and this is why it would benefit you to vote no for the union. um, if we get rid of secret ballot elections, that campaign period's going to go bye bye.
Mhm.
And it's going to put a tremendous emphasis on HR managers and supervisors to really know what the potential warning signs of union activity are
Mhm.
so that a company can respond before those cards come in.
Mhm.
And um, the flip side of that is, and truthfully, like the best union avoidance campaign is just being a good employer,
Mhm.
treating your employees well, treating them with respect. Making sure that employees, have an open avenue to complain and their complaints or concerns are taken seriously. I mean, a positive employee focused corporate culture is the best union avoidance strategy.
Mhm.
But it certainly helps to know when the union is sniffing around, and so it is really incumbent upon, particularly if secret ballot elections go away, as the NLRB's general counsel is arguing for, to know when unions might potentially be talking to your employees.
Mhm. That's good advice. Less hand wringing, more recognize and respond. John, it's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Orqua, and my guest today is John Hyman, employment labor attorney at Wickens Herzer Panza, author, speaker, and blogger at ohioemployerlawblog.com. We are back. All right, John, so what can we as employers do now to address what's ahead in this golden age of organizing?
Gotta have a very, very serious look at what your workplace culture is. How are you treating your workers? Do they feel valued? Do they feel respected? Um, you gotta you gotta take an honest and frank look at kind of your culture, and is it a culture that might be ripe for union organizing? You got to look at what's going on in your city and in your industry. Unions tend to organize kind of industry wide. And so, if there are employers, businesses in your industry that are being organized, you can assume that union organizers, if they are not currently talking to your employees, they will be
Mhm.
in the immediate future. And HR needs to educate itself on the union organizing process. There is almost across the board, we have generations of HR professionals that have zero history
Mhm.
dealing with union organizing. They don't know what the rules of the road are. There are things you can say and things you can't say during a union organizing campaign. You can offer facts and opinions. You can't threaten. You can't interrogate, etc.
Mhm.
but there's a line as to what all that means, and HR needs to educate itself on that so that it then can educate managers and supervisors. Because the last thing you want to do is, win the battle, win the election, but then lose the war because
Mm,
ballots get thrown out because you did something illegal during the campaign. And
mm.
so there is a large knowledge gap in human resources about union organizing that has to be backfilled very, very quickly.
So clearly, education, labor relations education for human resources. But what kind of education would you recommend for our leaders and our team members?
On the leadership side, I think I think they need to educate themselves. Number one, about kind of what's going on in the industry, right? As I said, to make sure that they're aware of kind of are they a potential target? They need to educate themselves about kind of where their work or how their workforce is feeling and kind of where their workforce is. But again, you can't kind of surveil employees about unions and their views on
Mhm,
unionization. You can generally about kind of how they're feeling about, is this a good place to work? Or you certainly do satisfaction surveys, and that would be something I would recommend. And then, for employees, I think, you can have a conversation with employees about the negatives of unionization in general, there's a fear out there, and I hear this from clients a lot, of we don't want to start talking to our employees about unions because we don't want to plant any seeds of any
mhm,
ideas.
mhm.
And you know that 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 cat's out of the bag now. I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
Starbucks and Amazon, it's all over the news. You can't avoid it. So
Mhm,
your employees are thinking about it. They're at a minimum thinking about it, if not actively talking about it. And if they're
mhm,
talking about it, that's one quick step from talking about it with a union organizer. And so I don't think there's any harm at this point in having the conversation with your employees about why you as a business owner don't think a union makes sense, and explaining to them what they might kind of where they are from a positive standpoint with you as their employer,
mhm,
and then what they could lose if a union comes in. Things like losing the ability to talk directly with management, although, again, Jennifer Abruzzo wants to take that talking point away from employers.
mhm,
Um, and things like, prioritizing seniority over merit, right? Employees get promoted based on how long they've been with the company, not how good of an employee they are. Protecting, bad employees sometimes get protected because of just cause standards and collective bargaining agreements. And so
mhm,
there's conversations you can have with employees about the negatives of unionization while you still bring it back and focus it on kind of all the positive things that you as a business, you as an employer offer them as employees.
mhm. And of course, we've talked about the Jennifer Bruzzo's memo several times. Let's talk a little bit more about what's happening over at the NLRB. What are the things should we be keeping an eye on?
The three main talking points in her CMEX memo, the trying to get rid of captive audience speeches, or at least put some
Mhm,
really, I call them almost like Miranda rights for employees. Put some serious rules around disclosures that have to be made before you talk to an employee about a manager or supervisor talks to an employee either
mhm,
individually or in a group setting about unionization. Card check recognition, and then wanting to eliminate the ability of employers to tell employees that if a union comes in, you'll get rid of kind of direct communication between, all conversations have to go through a union rep. Those are the three, I think, biggest issues that are on the NLRB's radar, and all three, I think, would be paradigm shifting
mhm.
for employers.
All right, so shifting gears here a little bit, tell me about your work with Wickens Sirzer Panza.
So I wear two hats here at the firm. I chair our labor and employment practice group, and I also co-chair our craft beer practice group as well. So I work with employers of all sizes, both as outside employment counsel, outside general counsel for businesses, and then I litigate for them as well in a variety of in courts on discrimination, wage hour, non-compete, trade secret cases, and then in various, the EEOC, NLRB, and
Mm,
Department of
mhm,
Labor, other administrative agencies as well. And then I've over the years have represented a number of craft breweries here in Northeast Ohio, and have recently decided to kind of put that together into a more formal kind of practice group here at my firm. And so we represent kind of the craft beer industry here in Northeast Ohio as well.
Hmm. And of course, I know you best from your presence on LinkedIn and, of course, your blog. How long have you been blogging, and what motivated you to start the blog?
I've been blogging for it'll be 15 years on the 9th of May.
Wow, that's a long
Yeah, it's
time.
crazy. And
Yeah,
and I do it 5 days a week. So it's something like I think it's approaching something like 4,000 posts. It is
crazy.
literally like an encyclopedia of labor and employment law.
Yeah.
If you are looking for an answer to a labor and employment law question, ohioemployerlawblog.com. There's a search box. If you can't find it, I'll give you $1 for every employment law question. That's my wife won't be happy with that answer, but yeah. And why did I start? I mean, I had been reading blogs for a while to kind of learn and consume content and kind of make myself a better lawyer. And what I noticed was there was nobody in kind of my geographic area that was maintaining uh, an employer focused blog. So I decided to give it a shot, and it was a couple of law firms ago. But I went to them with the business plan and said, "Look, it's not going to cost you anything.
Hmm.
It's free other than my time writing the post." And they said,
Right.
"Give it a shot." And then 6 months later, I found myself being quoted on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and I was like,
Oh,
"Man, this thing
yeah.
might actually work."
Hmm.
So it's been, I mean, one of, and my LinkedIn presence is an extension of that, but it's
Hmm.
been uh, probably the most rewarding thing I've done professionally. It's I've met a tremendous amount of people, some of whom I've only met through blogging, but consider some of my closest friends. It has kept me current in my career and in my practice area. It's introduced me to people like you, and has opened up opportunities like
Hmm.
this as well. So it's been just a tremendously invaluable professional experience.
Yeah, incredibly positive. So, where can we go to find out more about you, about Wickens or Panza, or about your work?
You can go to wickenslaw.com, or you can go to ohioemployerlawblog.com. One is information about my firm. The other is the blog where I write Monday through Friday on all issues labor and employment.
Excellent. I want to let our listeners know that those links will all be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to unlock that today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, John, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are questions I ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
I've been looking forward to this. I'm very ready.
All right. So our first question is a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about a golden age of union organizing. In your opinion, which of these films from the golden age of Hollywood would you rather watch, Casablanca or The Wizard of Oz?
Oh, Casablanca all day,
Excellent.
all day.
All
One
right.
of the. I mean, is there ever been a? I mean, if you were to objectively say, like objectively, what is the greatest movie ever made?
Mhm.
I mean, that's on. It's got to be in everybody's top 3 list, right?
sure,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. It's Casablanca, The Godfather, and I don't know what else, but it is. Yeah, Casablanca all day.
All right. Excellent. All right. Next question is, what is the best book that you've read recently?
The Midnight Library by Matt Haig.
I
Are you
read
familiar?
that.
Are you
Yeah.
familiar with that?
Yeah, I read it.
Oh, you read it. Well,
Yeah.
great. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't read as much as I used to be. Like a voracious reader when I was a kid growing up. I used to read a book or two a week,
Mhm.
and all the way through college. And now that I get paid to read and write for a living,
Mhm.
the allure of pleasure reading has unfortunately kind of
Yeah.
slipped away. So the only time I really read for pleasure now is when I go on vacation.
Mhm.
We went down to Florida for spring break at the back end of March,
Mm.
and took the Midnight Library with me, and I loved it. What
Yeah.
a fantastic book.
It was a good one. I really liked it as well. What is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
Favorite thing about the work I do is probably helping make employers better employers. I think I've been doing this now for almost 25 years, representing businesses on labor and employment issues, and I've definitely developed kind of golden rule type philosophy on how I think employers should manage their employees. And I think too often, I think employers, and for that matter, I think those of us that advise employers on the legal side, get caught in this kind of hamster wheel of, is it legal? And I think we lose focus on the fact that the law is a floor, not a ceiling, and that no business should be striving just to be legally compliant, because that does not make you it won't stop you from getting sued. You might win lawsuits, but it's not necessarily going to make you a good employer. And so kind of what gets me out of bed every day and kind of energizes me to do my job is helping employers kind of treat their workers with the level of respect that I think they deserve and with which they should be treated. Because at the end of the day, like, they're a business's most important assets. Like, you can't make your widget without the workers to make that widget. And if you mistreat your workers, you are mistreating what I think is a company's most valuable asset.
That's a fantastic perspective, and I love the law is the floor, not the ceiling. All right, next question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Protect your reputation at all costs. It's the most important thing you have. As an attorney, I don't ever want to, and I won't ever, for example, like, compromise my ethics for a client. At the end of the day, my reputation, anybody's reputation, is the best and most important, asset to you as a professional. I was on Twitter yesterday, and I tweeted something about an article I read about the Starbucks organizing, and someone who, from her profile, she looked like she was a recent law student, but very, like, vocally pro-union, and had some very kind of nice things to say to me very publicly about my view of Starbucks and union organizing in general. And like, I went to DM her to say, like, if I can give you, without being accused of mansplaining, if I can give you just a small piece of advice from someone that's been a legal professional for 25 years, like, you're just getting started, and do you really want to be, like, using that kind of language in a very public I really felt strongly that I wanted to give her that advice, and then I went to DM her and saw that she blocked me, so to hell with it.
Yeah, okay, there you go. All right, so shifting focus completely, who or what inspires you?
My kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My kids.
For sure.
That question's low-hanging fruit. That's easy.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's everything I do for them. So that is, I love my job. I love being a management side labor and employment lawyer and guiding employers, as I said before. But at the end of the day, if my time on this earth is up and I pass on, if my tombstone reads, John Hyman, he was a great lawyer, I have miserably failed in my mission on this planet. So dad and husband, or my wife would say husband and dad first. She'd probably say dad first too, but dad and spouse first, and then lawyer second. Always. And I think that you got to focus on, it's not that my clients and my work aren't important, because obviously they are, but the number one most important job is I brought living beings onto this earth, and I am charged with making them helping them become the best people they can be, and I take that very, very seriously.
That is inspirational. All right, John, thanks so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to our listeners. Once again, this is your reminder to grab the companion guide for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you'd like to be on Project HR, or you know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@iriconsultants.com. And last but certainly not least, to make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR, I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast. Drop us a line, leave us a review, or give us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.